the record. Thank you, Julia. So I want to welcome everyone to the March 2nd, 2023 meeting of the Seattle Design Commission. Our meetings are designed to meet the updates to the Open Public Meeting Act, requiring in-person meetings and an online attendance component for commissioners and the public. Our meetings are being recorded through WebEx, and they're posted at a later date on our website. For today's meeting, we will be receiving a briefing by Sound Transit on the West Seattle to Ballard light rail extension. I think I got that right. Areas of further study from 9 until 10:30. We'll be breaking from 10:30 to 12:30, and we'll be picking up commission business from 12:30 to 1:30. And then finally, from 1:30 to 3, we will have a continued review of the public trust component of the 200 Taylor Avenue North Alley vacation. And in the afternoon, that action will be taken by Adam Amrine. So for all of our meetings, the team will provide a briefing or an overview on the proposal. There will be an opportunity for public comment. We'll make sure that we provide an opportunity after the briefing to recognize members of the public that may be attending online, and we'll provide them with 2 minutes for public comment. After which, each commissioner will ask clarifying questions. We typically start in alphabetical order by first name. And I think that works well because we're all online today, and we'll follow that with discussion as well. Because we're not taking an action, there really aren't formal minutes, but there will be some type of summary available. I think at this point, what we should do is start with introductions of commissioners in alphabetic order by first name, and then we'll have staff and then the presenters. When you're speaking or when you're not speaking, make sure that you mute because of echoes and things like that. And finally, when you are speaking, though, please turn your camera on because Wendy Bandekar on our staff is hearing impaired. And so it furthers her experience and it increases the value of the experience when you have the video on as well as and when you're talking. So I will pause there, and why don't we start with introductions of commissioners in alphabetical first name, and Adam Amrine isn't with us, so I think we start with Elizabeth.
Not Ben?
Oh, right, thank you. Ben, hi Ben.
Yes, hi, thank you. Yeah, Ben Gist, Design Commissioner and the Architect role. Is that enough to say?
Yeah, thank you, Ben.
Thank you.
Happy to follow you, Ben. Elizabeth Connor, Artist Commissioner. Erica.
Yeah, Erica Bush, Urban Design Commissioner.
I used to follow the E's, but Kevin, I think you get to go next.
Good morning, Kevin O'Neill. I am a new member of the commission taking on the transportation planner role. Hi, Sandra. Hi, Dan. Good to see you.
And I'm Jill Crary, an at-large commissioner. And this is my first meeting as chair, too. So I'll be figuring out what that means as we go along.
All right. And I am Molly Spitalnik. I am the Get Engaged Commissioner and an urban designer.
I think I'm next. I'm trying to do the alphabet. Phoebe Bogert. I'm the new Landscape Architect Commissioner.
Hi, Phoebe. Thank you. Okay. Yeah, I think that's us. So, and then following the staff, Michael Jenkins. Valerie.
Valerie Keenest.
Wendy.
Wendy Bandekar.
And finally, Julia. And then Juliet Acevedo. And then finally, Sound Transit staff.
Sure, I'll start off. I'm Sandra Fan, Project Director for West Seattle Ballard Link Extensions for Sound Transit and representing planning, environment, and project development at Sound Transit. Daniel, maybe.
Sure. Yeah, Daniel Turner with Sound Transit, planning lead for the West Seattle Ballard Link Extensions Project. And
Thanks, Jay.
Alexis.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Alexis Lair, and I am the Senior Engagement Specialist at Sound Transit on the West Seattle and Ballard Link Extensions project.
And I think with that, I think we'll go ahead and start with your briefing. We have you until 10:30 this morning. Because it's not a formal project, we don't necessarily follow, it's a little looser, but if your presentation is about a half an hour, 45 minutes, that way we can have commissioners do their side of the things before 10:30. If that sounds good, I will go ahead and mute and throw it your way, Sam.
Sounds good. I actually did want to ask a question. The way we got our presentation set up, we could kind of walk through areas by geography. So if it's helpful to have it broken up and, so you have a chance to ask some questions as we walk through it rather than waiting till the end. I just wanted to offer that opportunity.
Sure. If you think that that'll work, that sounds better. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. It's just the way we've got it structured now. So thanks for the great overview, Valerie. That was some of what I was going to cover in case people weren't aware. I guess I'll just repeat a few things just to recap what's happened in the last year. I believe we were back, we presented to you maybe about a year ago, and as you mentioned, there are a number of new commissioners that have joined since then. Just for a little bit of orientation, maybe just repeating some of what Valerie mentioned, we published a draft EIS early last year, early in 2022, and had a 90-day public comment period. And then in July of 2022, that was when the Sound Transit Board identified a preferred alternative for the West Seattle extension and asked us to conduct further studies along the corridor. There are 16 in total, which is the focus of this presentation today. Some of them were in West Seattle, and we'll cover those towards the end, but most of them were for the Ballard Link extension. So, and the idea is that we're updating the board early this year. We also held a public comment period. We have some slides speaking to that. For the public to be able to weigh in on the results of our further studies is what we called them, that we were asked to conduct between July and February of this year. And so if any of you have been following the activities at the board level, we've had quite a lot of presentations at the board since January, or actually throughout the last year, it feels like, but particularly the last couple of months where we've delved into some of these areas pretty deeply with board members. So we're providing you a condensed version of what we've provided to them, because some of those presentations were several hours long. So certainly don't want to go into that here. So with that quick introduction, I think we can go ahead and move forward. So this was the motion that was passed in July, confirming or modifying the preferred light rail route and station locations for the West Seattle, specifically the West Seattle extensions, and asking us to conduct further studies in some areas to inform what we're hoping to be a potential board action in March to confirm or modify the preferred alternative for the Ballard Link extension. This motion was covering both, and this was what was in July. Next slide, please. So these are the about 16 areas of further study. You can see they span the entire corridor. I'm not going to read every single one of these because we break it up by segment, but just for orientation, because I know that there were some questions up front about what was included in Ballard and what was included in West Seattle. You'll see that West Seattle is represented on the left side of this map. So north is to the right, and Ballard is at the far end to the right on this exhibit. The green highlighted line there shows what was identified as the preferred alternative for the West Seattle extension. And as was being pointed out, the West Seattle extension extends from SoDo to the Alaska Junction in West Seattle. So again, there were, as you'll see here, there were some areas of further study, and we'll touch on those later in the presentation. And then the Ballard extension extends from Soto all the way to Ballard and includes the CID, downtown, Inner Bay areas and Ballard. So all told about 13, 14 stations, depending on how you count them. Next slide, please. So I mentioned that we did some engagement, or we've been involved in engaging with the community since July on these further studies. We've conducted 12 open houses and workshops, mostly focused on the CID area, as well as the Inner Bay Ballard areas where we did have public open houses. There were 4 online surveys conducted throughout this period, over 100 community briefings, tours, and property owner meetings, 6 fairs, festivals, and other tabling events, 17 email updates, a number of posts on social media platforms, 20 businesses that have been engaged in door-to-door outreach, and 180 residents engaged in language forums. This is just a quick snapshot. We actually have more details later for specific areas along the corridor where we have had quite where a lot of our engagement has been focused. So I'm going to go ahead at this point and hand this over to Daniel Turner. Again, he's our planning lead, and he'll present the slides on the further studies. And of course, we can pause at each geographic point and can help answer questions.
Thanks, Sandra. Yeah, there's a lot of slides. Hopefully you don't get tired of my voice as we go through, but we'll pause when you hear others, and Alexis will have opportunities to chime in on the engagement process. So we'll start with the Chinatown International District, or CID, segment, further studies and community feedback. So this is just a reminder slide. These are the alternatives that were studied in the draft EIS. You'll notice they're all in blue, as the board had not identified a preferred alternative for the CID segment in the draft EIS. Next slide. So the board had directed a series of further study elements for the CID, including desire to seek to address the remaining questions, or minimize potential impacts and maximize community benefits, explore how to create an integrated, well-connected hub for all modes, opportunities to enhance ridership and access, activate or modify use of Union Station and Plaza, as well as funding and cost-saving opportunities. And then include study concepts requested by the community and agency partners, including but not limited to work to define a 4th Avenue shallow tunnel option with the goal to maximize benefits while minimizing costs and impacts. Slide. Alexis, do you want to cover a bit of the engagement activities that we've conducted over the last several months?
Yeah, I'm happy to. Thanks, Daniel. So you can see here some of the specifics of the engagement on transit in the CID. The kind of core of the work was sort of workshops and open houses that spanned over the last 5 to 6 months. And this was the goal was to be sort of have a meaningful engagement that was iterative. So the intent was to have community feedback at each of those meetings shape the scope and direction of that further study efforts and engagement process. So that was kind of like the kind of foundation of our engagement. We also, in addition, sort of as our wraparound engagement sort of supports this, had community briefings and meetings, over 35 of them. We did have online surveys that, again, those 3 were sort of kind of spaced out within kind of that workshop timing. We did door-to-door business outreach in language, residential, and business forums. And then we had over 650 survey responses on the surveys combined. All of the materials were translated into traditional Chinese, simplified Chinese, and Vietnamese. In addition, we had interpreters for Cantonese, Mandarin, and Vietnamese provided at all of our meetings.
Yeah, thanks, Alexis. So we're going to get into some of the findings from the further study activities. This slide is focused on refinements to the 4th Avenue Shallow, or CID 1A in the draft DIS alternative, with a focus on maximizing community benefits while minimizing costs and impacts. You'll see some costs defined on the bottom left of these slides as we go through. And it covers the segment from Pike Street to Holgate Street. So there are some dependencies beyond the CID segment from these choices in CID, and that's covered through that extent. And you'll see for this option, cost of $3.1 billion for that segment, which is a delta of plus $700 million compared to the realigned financial plan. The results of the studies summarized here on the right side on the graphic. I'll start on the top left. There was identified displacement to the Icon apartment building in the draft EIS, and through further study, we were able to reduce this displacement from a period of 4 years to two-month periods. Continuing clockwise, we found we were able to reduce noise and air quality construction effects through a range of strategies that were identified by the construction and engineering teams. Continuing on the bottom there, a reduction in the duration of the partial closure on 4th Avenue by 1 year to 5 years. It had been 6 years identified in the draft EIS for that partial closure of 4th Avenue south of Jackson Street. The area north of Jackson Street, which is a 4-year full closure on 4th Avenue, remained the same. And then on the left there, reduction in potential impacts to BNSF, but that would lengthen the construction duration by 1 year. So an overall duration of 12 years. It's a bit confusing, so the overall duration goes up, but the duration of roadway closures goes down. So construction continues, but the roadway would be able to open up a bit earlier. Next slide, please. So this is summarizing some of the community feedback that we heard through this process on the 4th Avenue shallow alternative. There was some interest in 4th shallower option, which we'll talk about in a bit, to facilitate quicker transfers, but others were concerned about the additional potential impacts of the shallower alternative. There was interest in any potential construction efficiencies across public projects to minimize disruption and harm to the CID and Pioneer Square residents. We heard a lot of concerns about construction duration and traffic detour effects with this option, including potential impacts to CI businesses, residents, and services. But strong interest in a transit hub with centralized access to the CID, Pioneer Square, and other transit modes, as well as activating Union Station as part of a broader community vision. We'll talk about that in a few slides. And we definitely heard some interest in a Midtown Station location for access to First Hill. So through the further study process, other station locations were identified for a station near CID. And this option is called the station north of CID. And again, this came out of the community process that Alexis identified. I'll start with the costs here and then describe a bit about this option since it's new. So for that same segment, we identified in the previous option, this cost would be $2.05 billion from Pike to Holgate, and that's a cost delta of minus $360 million compared to the realigned financial plan. I'll go through the graphic a bit before going through the comments. So you'll notice the dot where the CID station is near Jackson Street. And that would be the existing International District station. So a new station here would instead be north of CID, adjacent to the Pioneer Square stations. You can see that green dot to the north there. This would essentially consolidate the Midtown and CID stations into a single station there and provide a transfer opportunity between the 1 and 2 and 3 lines at Pioneer Square instead of at CID. So a lot of that cost delta is because of the removal of a station with this option. So again, this consolidates the Midtown and CID stations. I'll start to go through these bullets. It would displace the King County Administration Building and some of the social services housed just south of there. But that does present a fairly large equitable transit-oriented development opportunity on that site where it would be constructed. It would also avoid direct station construction disruption in the CID. That station location would be within a 10-minute walk to the CID, Pioneer Square, and Coleman Dock, and the south end of downtown and Midtown. We did find through coordination with the city and Metro that there's an opportunity to facilitate transit integration with the Madison BRT or Rapid Ride G line through a deviation of that route. And it would accommodate direct transfers at the Pioneer Square station. In terms of construction effects, the biggest construction effect would be a temporary closure of James Street between 3rd Avenue and 4th Avenue for 4 years. But we did also find that we could potentially reduce or remove that effect through coordination with the adjacent property owner along James Street there. So there's an opportunity. Next slide. Some feedback that we heard on this option, there were some concerns expressed about consolidating the Midtown and CID stations, but there was interest in opportunities for community-driven, equitable, transit-oriented development, potential to activate the City Hall Park, and improving safe pedestrian connections to the existing station in CID and surrounding neighborhoods. There was also interest in the shorter construction duration with this option and avoiding construction disruption in the CID while still providing access to the residents. There were some concerns about the reduced access to the stadiums along the one line, as well as Sounder. But there was interest in the direct underground transfers between the link lines at Pioneer Square Station and the opportunity to improve the existing station entrances at Pioneer Square Station. Next option explored was the station south of CID. So we'll start with the cost and then move over to the description of this option. Again, on the bottom left, this would be a cost of $2.5 billion in that same segment. And that would be a cost delta of plus $80 million compared to the realigned financial plan. So this alternative is shown there on the graphic. Again, we'll start with that dot where the CID International District Station is Union Station. And along the green line, you'll see a dot to the south there between Seattle Boulevard and Royal Brom Way. There would be entrances at Seattle Boulevard and at Royal Brom Way. So just the south of Uwajimaya and near the existing stadium station on the south end. This option would avoid direct station construction disruption in the CID, as well as present an opportunity for equitable TOD on that site. Construction effects would be minimal with limited detours. The closure of 6th Avenue, which is currently closed, would be the primary construction effect here. And that would be between Seattle Boulevard and Royal Brom Way. However, this option does not accommodate direct transfers between light rail lines. The station location would be within a 10-minute walk to the CID and stadium. So it's about a 5-minute walk up to Hing Hay Park from that Seattle Boulevard entrance. Next slide, the community feedback. So we did hear some interest in avoiding construction disruption in the CID while still providing access to the neighborhood. There was interest in the opportunities for equitable TOD, interest in trying to get an entrance closer to the CID with some public space. So we did explore potential entrance north of Seattle Boulevard, which would be just south of the Uwajimaya parking lot. There was interest in improving pedestrian connections to the existing station in the CID, the stadiums, and Sounder. But there were concerns that this option does not accommodate direct transfers between the link lines. And overall limited interest in this option without the North CID station being paired with it. So the next option is a combination of those two that we just discussed. This is a station north of CID and a station south of CID. The cost overall for this option would be $2.55 billion in this segment, which is a cost delta of plus $160 million compared to the realigned financial plan. So I'll just quickly describe this on the graphic on the right. Essentially, this would be taking the CID and Midtown stations and shifting them both a few blocks to the south. So again, that station north of CID connecting into the Pioneer Square station, that location being 2 to 3 blocks south of the Midtown station location. And then the south of CID is the option that we just reviewed with an entrance near Seattle Boulevard and Royal Bromway, a few blocks to the south of the International District Station. So some description of this option. This is largely redundant, but we displaced the King County Administration Building and Social Services up near the north of CID option. We avoid direct station construction disruption in the CID. The access shed within a 10-minute walk includes the CID stadiums, Pioneer Square, Coleman Dock in the south end of downtown. Again, the opportunity to facilitate a transfer between the Madison BRT, Rapid Ride G line, and Link at the Pioneer Square station and north of CID, and direct transfers accommodated at that north of CID option at Pioneer Square. Some community feedback here, some interest again in the community-driven equitable TOD opportunities, as well as improving safe pedestrian connections between the stations in South Downtown. And there was interest in this combination, which accommodates transfers between all link lines and access to the CID, stadiums, Pioneer Square, and south end of downtown, Midtown, while avoiding the station construction disruption in CID. As part of this further study period and through the community work that we did, that Alexis described, we reviewed and developed some options for activation of the Union Station and Plaza area. So I'll just describe a bit of what came out of this process. There was a strong interest in public safety as a key value for the design and management of this area. We've identified uses and activities for the Union Station itself, including mobility, commerce, and community spaces. And then interest in and community support for investment in the historic station and the surrounding plaza area. So what's shown here on the graphic is a concept that was reviewed. I think there are a couple of different iterations that could include retail and community spaces and could be accommodating transit access, or it could work also with the other options as well. It's not dependent on what happens with the CID station. Some additional community feedback on this process overall and the Union Station. There was strong interest in activating Union Station and Plaza. That we heard that throughout. There was interest in aligning the public projects that are occurring in this area or could occur to limit impacts and contribute to a long-term community vision. There was strong interest expressed in additional park and green space in the area for the community, and strong interest in supporting the economic health of small businesses and maintaining the cultural hub, avoiding displacements of businesses and residents. And finally, strong interest in improving safety and pedestrian connections throughout the South Downtown area. This is a summary slide. I know it's a lot of text, so hopefully there'll be time after for you to digest this. But this is comparing the results of this further study. We have the refined 4th Avenue shallow station on the top left, followed by the station north of CID only. Because of the limited interest in the south of CID only, we're not showing that here. But on the right, the north of CID and south of CID combination. I'll just quickly run through this in the interest of time. Like I said, there's a lot of text, so I'll just pick out a few key items here. In terms of feasibility, there is construction and schedule risk associated with the 4th Avenue shallow station. I know Sandra might get into that a bit more later in the presentation. In terms of passenger experience, the shallow CID station would be about 80 feet, but would lead to a very deep Midtown station at about 200 feet deep. And there would be about 3.2 minute transfer time between link lines at the shallow 4th Avenue. For the north of CID only, you'd have a shallower station in that area of about 80 to 105 feet from, it differs at the platform length, and about a 3.3 minute transfer time between link lines. Unlike the shallow 4th Avenue, this would actually be a fully below grade link transfer, so there's an opportunity for an improved passenger experience in that regard. But it would add a transfer between the one line and the sounder because you wouldn't have that direct access like you would with 4th Avenue. And this is about the same for the north of CID and south of CID station. However, I'll point out with that sounder transfer, there's an opportunity with the sounder platform extension project that would actually add access down at Seattle Boulevard to provide closer access to that south of CID station. In terms of ridership access and TOD, and then I think we can move on after that. Sorry, Alexis, I know we're maybe going a bit long here. We don't expect a change in ridership with the refined 4th Avenue shallow station. However, due to construction of this option, there would be a full closure of the Link light rail south of CID for 6 to 7 weeks, and this was identified in the draft EIS, as well as a closure to the stadium station for 2 years. With the north of CID only, we're seeing a potential for a small reduction in ridership overall, however, potential for equitable TOD at the north of CID station, and a similar finding for the north and south combination. Okay. This option here is comparing the 4th Avenue shallow with the 4th Avenue shallower. We didn't really touch much on the shallower configuration, but through community feedback and some of the board motion, we looked at the potential to make the 4th Avenue station shallower. We did find that you could reduce the depth from about 80 feet to 40 to 45 feet, which would reduce the transfer time between link stations between 3.2 minutes to 2.5 minutes on average. The other thing of note with the shallower station in terms of passenger experience is that it could lead to a shallower Midtown station at about 140 to 145 feet compared to the 4th Avenue shallow, which leads to that deeper Midtown station. I'll just touch a bit on the feasibility. The construction and schedule risks are similar with this shallower option, but it does also add some additional risk relating to crossing the existing downtown Seattle Transit Tunnel and additional risks to BNSF and constructing near BNSF. I'll just also point out very quickly that in terms of environmental effects, the shallower option would extend roadway closures north. It would add closures of Yesler Way and Washington Street for 2 years, include reconstruction of the Yesler Bridge. It also adds displacement of the King County Administration Building and the social services provided in that area, and would also increase cost by about $100 million overall. Apologies, I went through very quickly, but I think we're going to pause for any questions on this segment.
I have some questions, but I thought I'd see if any other commissioners had any first.
I just had a quick question on displacement of the Icon apartments. What does that mean exactly?
Alexis, do you want to talk about Icon displacements?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about, so Icon Apartments, they're located on 4th and Jackson, on the corner of 4th and Jackson. And they are, as I recall, Daniel, is it 2 month short displacements, right? towards the beginning, or is?
Yeah, so in the draft EIS, we identified 4 years, and the reason is because of the reconstruction of the viaduct that it abuts the apartment and provides access to the apartment. So the finding in the draft EIS was that reconstruction of that viaduct would restrict access and residents couldn't get to the apartment safely during that time. The additional work that was done identified an opportunity to work in some decking temporarily to provide access. And I think there's times where that decking would need to be installed where access couldn't be provided. So there would be these 2 month periods where residents would have to be relocated temporarily. But a reduction from essentially a full, what is I think considered a full displacement with the 4 year initially.
Which was part of that sort of being responsive to that community feedback and that board action to sort of further refine Fourth Avenue impacts.
Thank you.
And one related question, I know we've asked in the past about the policies surrounding permanent displacements and have looked through those a bit. But I'm curious with these temporary displacements, how Sound Transit manages those temporary displacements.
So we actually look at those on a case-by-case basis. I can't speak to all of them, so I guess that's something that we would have to look at case by case when the time comes, as the design progresses and as we work with our real property team.
Jill, I just wanted to have a quick check-in with you. We're about heading to 9:40. I haven't seen anyone from the public join us. I'll continue to watch.
Right.
And if I see anyone, I'll give you all a heads up. We thought one member of the public was going to attend, but I don't think that they have. So we'll just keep an eye out and you guys can continue on.
Thank you, Michael. Any other commissioners have questions? This is a really complicated.
Jill, this is Kevin. Just 2 quick questions. One, in terms of construction type, and I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with the DEIS. Are the stations all cut and cover?
For these options, all these stations are cut and cover. The 4th Avenue shallow option requires demolition of the existing 4th Avenue viaduct, as well as all the piles that the viaduct is built on in order to construct the station, and then reconstruction. So that's the one of the unique factors of the 4th Avenue, but the cut and cover method would be for all these.
Yeah, thanks. And I remember that the viaduct issue coming up before is still obviously a big issue. Then my second question, and if you want to defer this to later, that's fine. But I heard Sandra say at the beginning of the presentation, 13 or 14 stations. And the SD3 vote was for stipulated 14 stations. So if stations are consolidated, like the north of CID option or the potentially Avalon station later, if there's a net loss of a station or stations, does that affect the environmental process at all? I know that's a bigger process question, so if you want to defer that to later, that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it would affect the environmental process, but I think there are ways to cover that without it being a new, I think the thought right now for Avalon, which I know is later on in the presentation, is that would just be an option in the final environmental documentation. So, but the 13 to 14, I think what I meant by that is there's people have counted stadium or not counted stadium in the past, and that was the reference there.
So that was a question I had about these stations too, because I heard Daniel explain that some of these are new ideas. And what I've seen thus far is some of the data, like ridership numbers and other things, seem to have just been copied from other CID alternatives onto fact sheets about these new locations. Don't these new locations have to have that entire DEIS level of data developed about them?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, yes. I mean, what we've got here is just the analysis we've done for these further studies. Whether or not they move forward would be up to the board to decide in this month. And then we would look at what would need to be done environmentally to complete the work.
And Sandra, I'm going to add that the ridership specifically, we did do a new ridership modeling exercise to look at all of these, including some of the options that we'll review farther north and downtown. So in terms of ridership, we did do the additional analysis.
Daniel, did you also, I heard you discuss, but I want to just make sure that I got it right. There are program goals that were established for different connections to all the different modes that were supposed to happen at the CID. And I believe that you said that none of those moved to the North CID and it can happen in conjunction with the Pioneer Square Station, all except for the Sounder. Is that the one that can't be met by moving?
Yeah, maybe we can go back to the slide that shows the two, the north and the south. Yeah, okay. So yeah, you have that correct, and that the link transfer would essentially move a station north, and we find that would add about 3 to 3.5 minutes for a particular trip, which would be someone riding in from the east side that would maybe want to go to the airport. And so from the east side south, so that trip you would add 3 to 3.5 minutes because you're going one station north. And for other transfers, it doesn't really make that big a difference in terms of travel time. The big difference is for Sounder and Amtrak, where with the 4th Avenue option, you're directly adjacent to the Sounder and 4th Avenue platform. So it's a bit different. There's a variety of ways that Sounder transfers could be accommodated in this scheme. One might mean that if you were trying to get somewhere on the one line, you could board the 2 or 3 lines at IDS and then transfer at one of those transfer points. We did also look a little bit further and see that, the North Sounder access point, which is on the north side of Jackson, is about a 4-minute walk to the south station option from north of CID. It's actually only a 2-block walk. So for folks that could do that, they could transfer directly to the one line that way. But I'll point out that north station access is only stairs. So for people that need something other than stairs, that wouldn't be a good option. And then the last would be, as I mentioned, this access project to extend the Sounder platform access to Seattle Boulevard. And maybe you can kind of see there where Seattle Boulevard is called out. So if that were to move forward, there could be access directly to a station entrance that would be about a 1.5 blocks from 4th Avenue at the south of CID option. So a variety of options, a bit different than what was envisioned initially.
Jill?
Yeah.
Sorry. I was just going to jump in with a couple questions if you were done, but I just wanted to check.
I had one more, Erica, but it could be one you have too. So why don't you go?
you finish up. It's totally okay.
Well, I was going to talk about Union Station.
Yeah, my questions are about Union Station as well. Like I'm seeing, these 2 north and south options financially being beneficial, but I guess I'm really trying to understand how Sound Transit would rationalize improvements to Union Station if they weren't tied to an access point, and how you guys make those decisions about mitigation efforts if they're not tied to direct access to your lines. That was one of my questions. And then I'd heard the community mention like specific numbers of lost ridership with the loss of the Midtown Tunnel of being close to 16,000 a day, which doesn't seem minimal. So I'm trying to sort of mentally make the connection between what you guys are seeing in your analysis and what I've been seeing from the community side regarding Midtown Station.
I'll touch just quickly on ridership, and then I'll turn to Sandra on the Union Station question. So the Midtown Station would essentially shift a few blocks to the south. So the riders don't go away, but they shift. So what we're seeing through the ridership modeling is that riders would shift to the north of CID option or to Westlake Station. There's actually quite a heavy overlap in the walk sheds between Westlake and Midtown Station. Overall, a slight reduction in ridership as for a few connections, they become a little less convenient. I will also point out that the deeper Midtown Station could have a potentially substantial effect on ridership, as the access times are more than what was initially assumed for station access. So there is a difference between the shallow Midtown Station and the deeper Midtown Station in terms of ridership and access. Overall, with the shallower station north of CID, the overall access times could be lower for some people with additional surface travel. So that's kind of what we're seeing. It's not that the 16,000 goes away, it's that it shifts, and maybe a few riders are choosing something different. Very specifically, a lot of the ridership in Midtown is driven by those office buildings. And so if folks are seeing, well, it's a little bit longer, they might walk, or they might take the 2-3 line. So, patterns might shift a bit, but it doesn't disappear when the station's gone, removed.
Just a little bit on the Union Station activation. That was, this was something that the board asked us to take a look at in our July action, actually, as part of the further studies, and definitely a common theme in our engagement with the community, that an interest in activating Union Station. Conveniently, we have a station there already, so there is some, there is some reason perhaps for us to also consider improving that area just to support the station that we have already. So that's something that's going to be up for consideration by the board, is looking at Union Station activation regardless of which alternative moves forward.
That's great. Elizabeth?
Yeah, I appreciated Daniel's descriptions of some of the transfers, and I think of all of this as a regional transit system as well. So I'm wondering if you have any kind of visualization, in a flyover of how some of these alternatives might work. I'm sitting here thinking it's almost a video game opportunity, because you have an existing system and you're building onto that system, and so what happens? What are all the layers of things that need to occur? So this might be a rhetorical question. I apologize. Is there any look at the entire system? How does the look at the entire system fit into this planning?
There's a variety of ways that we look at the whole system, and from a regional standpoint, there's I would say passenger focused. There's also operations focused, rail operations. So one of the ways we look at this is how the rail can operate with these different options. So that has been part of this further study, to look at meeting operational requirements, and very specifically that's single tracking requirements. And folks have been around Link recently, and there's been some maintenance and having to shut down a track, and frequencies kind of go way down. So one of the big requirements from operation is that we have crossover tracks placed in the right place along the line, so that when maintenance is required, we can maintain service of about 10 minutes or less. So that's, I'd say, the biggest kind of overall look at these sort of end-to-end, what does this mean and where are the crossovers, and making sure that we're able to meet our operational needs with all these options. I don't have a summary slide on that subject, but I think we've called out where there's been operational concerns within this slide deck. And I know that the crossover with the 4th Avenue shallow is actually adding a little bit of cost that might not be represented.
Yeah. Thanks. I think I'll just leave the question of, is there a possibility of something a little more multi-layered that might help answer some of these? And you don't have to answer it. Okay. That was enough. And I appreciate your being able to do it verbally as well.
And then, unless anybody else has any other questions, I think the last thing.
So I have one quick question.
In there.
Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
So in looking at the transfer differences between the North Station and the Fourth Avenue shallow refined. Is there a significant difference between the types of access and transfers in terms of escalators and elevators? So actually what facilities I use in transferring between the two? I see the times.
Yeah, actually, can we go back to that Union Station graphic? Because I don't have a perfect graphic to compare at hand, but for this you can kind of see. So the tricky thing with the transfer at the existing IDS is because of the soil condition and the way the station was built, we were not able to go underneath the station and provide access. So what that means is you're only able to get direct access between the mezzanine of the new station and the platform of the existing station in one direction. And based on this graphic, what you can imagine is that there's a station underneath 4th Avenue, and where that area at the back of Union Station is, there's a passageway underneath that would go directly to the southbound platform. So you would come up your series of escalators or elevators and go directly to that platform. But in the other direction, you have a much more kind of circuitous route. So you're having to either come up at the existing platform using the existing escalator or elevator or stair, or you would come up in the back of Union Station there, the new escalator and stair elevator combination, exit Union Station, and travel down to the existing northbound platform using the existing entrance. That's the situation here. At Pioneer Square, you would actually be going from mezzanine to mezzanine. So you would come up at the new station, and I apologize, I don't have a visualization directly handy, and we maybe at the end of this deck, but come up to the mezzanine level, you'd be going underneath James Street. The tricky thing is there's the BNSF tunnel directly there, because nothing's very simple in Seattle. So you have to go over the BNSF tunnel, you come down a level, and there would be escalators, stairs, it would kind of be a short down movement, as well as 2 elevators, go across, and then you would be in the mezzanine at the Pioneer Square station. So you can kind of imagine it's mezzanine to mezzanine. The average times are somewhat similar between the shallow and the Pioneer Square. The Pioneer Square is much shorter in one direction, much longer in the other, whereas, shallow is much shorter in one direction, much longer in the other, because of what I described here. Pioneer Square is basically the same because it's mezzanine to mezzanine. I hope that made sense.
Wildly helpful. Thank you so much.
Okay.
So I guess the last thing, I'm not sure that I've got this as a question, but just before we leave this really complicated area, I do just want to remind both our new commissioners and the Sound Transit staff that the commission has been very, very interested in the past in the 4th Avenue. And so thank you very much for the shallow and shallower. We've been very concerned about the activation of Union Station. So thank you very much for showing that. And we hope that all of these we hope that those continue to develop, as well as these new things you brought us. And I know we've taken a lot of time on this, so I guess we should just move on further north.
Yeah. Thank you, Jill. I just want to give everybody a heads up. We have a lot more slides to go through, so we may have to fly, I'm guessing. Is that right? We only have another 40 minutes, I think, or 35 minutes.
Okay, well, I will try to go
We'll
quickly
fly.
and be clear. That'll be my challenge.
Yeah.
So this will cover the downtown further studies and community feedback. So next slide. This is a description of the further studies we looked at through downtown. I'll start at the top and then go clockwise. We looked at shifting the Seattle Center Republican Station to the west to avoid some direct effects at the Seattle Center. We looked at connecting South Lake Union and Harrison Station to the Seattle Center Mercer Station to either North Tunnel Portal location. So these are called mix and match. I'll go through those. We looked for opportunities to provide station access from both sides of Denny Street at Denny Station. We looked at opportunities to reduce station depths, improve passenger access and experience, and refine the Midtown Station entrance. We looked at other potential station entrance refinements through the downtown area that I'll cover towards the end of this set. And finally, we looked at connecting the Westlake 5th Avenue station to the Denny Terry station. And and then back to the South Lake Union Harrison Station. So another mix and match option that we'll go through in a moment. Next slide. Alexis, do you wanna-
Briefly. Yeah, very quickly. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Right, so for the downtown segment, at a glance, did have over 20 with community groups. We had 5 workshops, outreach.
Alexis, your audio keeps cutting in and out.
You know, maybe what we could do, Daniel, I'll stop this here. You guys can see what the snapshot is, but Daniel, when we get to Interbay, would you cover that just in case?
Sure. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I will.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. All right, next slide then. Okay, so we're going to start with the South Lake Union mix and match, and this was connecting the Westlake 5th Avenue station to the Denny Terry station, and then back to the South Lake Union Harrison station. You can see there that represented in the graphic to the right, where the green line is connecting those options there. And we found at a very high level that this would avoid the temporary shutdown of the streetcar along Westlake Avenue associated with the Denny Westlake station option, but introduces a high risk for long haul fiber relocation with a minimum of 1-year overall project delay. There's fiber optic lines that run underneath Terry Station, providing fiber optic connections to quite a lot, and that's a very risky relocation. So that was the finding there. And then finally, the cost delta compared to the Reline financial plan, that this would add $200 million to the project cost for this mix and match option. Next slide. Some of the community feedback we heard on this option, there was interest in the Denny Westlake station location for DT1 for access and transit integration. There's interest in the access from both sides of Denny and opportunities to expand the walkshed. Concerns about the additional cost, risk, and project delay associated with the Denny Terry station location. But there was some interest in the mix and match to avoid the construction effects to Westlake, including the streetcar, buses, and other traffic and utility effects along Westlake Avenue. Next slide. I'll just go very quickly through the results comparison. The draft EIS option is shown there on the left, DT1, and then the mix and match. So there was a finding of a less convenient transfer to transit on Westlake Avenue with the Terry station location, as well as the introduction of construction and schedule risk. There's a minimal impact to ridership with this location overall. I will say that we also looked at an opportunity, I think this actually is covered later, to have entrances on both sides of Denny station, both sides of Denny Way with the Terry Avenue station. And this would include moving station entrances into the right of way. So we found an ability to provide those entrances and actually reduce the cost by about $10 million overall, compared to the plus 200 million. Next slide. I think we have graphics on that later on. The other mix and match that we looked at was at the Seattle Center station. This included connecting the South Lake Union Harrison station to the Seattle Center Mercer station, and then looked at either portal connection to the north. What we found was that the connection to the Republican portal was not practical due to operational issues that I mentioned earlier, those types of operational issues. This would include the partial closure effects on Mercer Street associated with the Mercer station location. It would avoid the construction effects of the northwest rooms that were associated with the Republican Seattle Center station. It would add 15 additional residential and 24 additional business displacements. And we did find that the noise and vibration effects to the Seattle Opera, King FM, and McCaw Hall could be mitigated. This would introduce essentially a new alignment going underneath those entities. And I should point out that we did find that it was practical to be able to connect those South Lake Union and Mercer stations But this would also have a cost delta of 210 million compared to the realigned financial plan, plus 210. Next slide. Some of the feedback we heard was a strong concern about residential and business displacements with the station on Mercer Street. Concerns about the potential traffic effects on Mercer. There were some concerns about the additional costs associated with this mix and match and the distance to Climate Pledge Arena and the Seattle Center. But there was interest in the location to avoid the construction effects near the Northwest Rooms, still provide access to the Seattle Center and the Uptown community, and the potential for equitable transit-oriented development. And some concerns about the noise and vibration effects during construction to the Seattle Opera and McCaw Hall. Slide. Okay, another refinement that we looked at was shifting the Seattle Center Republican Station to the west. So you can see there on the pink line, the location that was studied in the draft EIS, so just to the north of the Climate Pledge Arena. And I apologize for all these north arrows flipping around. North is kind of to the bottom right on this. And this would shift the station a couple blocks to the west along Republican Street. This would include temporary closure of Republican Street, which would have some access effects, but minimal traffic effects during construction. It would extend the cut and cover construction on Republican a longer distance. It would avoid construction effects near the Northwest Rooms. There are noise and vibration effects to the Uptown Cinema that can be mitigated. I think that that's specifically referring to during operations. There would be some construction effects adjacent to the adjacent to the Uptown Cinema, and 8 additional business displacements. And this would add $60 million to compared to the realigned financial plan. Some community feedback here, some concern about the alignment going underneath the Northwest Rooms and potential construction and property effects along Republican Street. There's some concerns about noise and vibration effects to the SIF Uptown Cinema. There was interest in the DT1 Seattle Center Station location, so the initial location from the draft EIS, because of its closer proximity to Seattle Center and Climate Pledge Arena. And there was interest in the proximity to the Seattle Center and Climate Pledge Arena, as well as the Uptown neighborhood, with this option without having the traffic effects associated with the Mercer Station option. Next slide. Just very quickly, comparison. Environmental effects are shown there in the blue box, which I think I mostly covered, as well as the cost effects. We're not seeing big differences in terms of feasibility, passenger experience, or ridership of these options. Next slide. Is that okay? We're gonna go through the entrance refinements, and then we'll be able to pause for questions. So this is what I was alluded to earlier at the Denny station with an entrance on both sides of Denny. So this is showing the Terry station option. North is to the right. And I was referring to the opportunity to provide access on both sides of Denny by shifting station entrances into the right of way. So what you're seeing here on, I don't know, Alexis, if you can kind of circle the Denny Way and Terry area, there you go, is a narrowing of Terry Avenue on the south side of Denny to provide a station entrance location. There would be, I think, just egress on the north side of Denny, and then a primary entrance up at John Street. This would, again, avoid the temporary shutdown of the streetcar. The entrance on the south side of Denny could shorten the walk to the streetcar and buses on Westlake Avenue. It would permanently narrow Terry Avenue with minimal traffic effects. Again, there is that high risk of the long-haul fiber relocation with a minimum 1-year overall project delay on Terry. And it would reduce the property acquisition and relocation by moving those entrances into the right of way. Next slide. We looked at some other entrance refinements. I apologize if this is so zoomed in. North is to the right a bit. This is for the Denny station on Westlake Avenue. And what you're seeing is Westlake Avenue and Lenora Street, where 8th Avenue and Lenora come in at that kind of funky intersection. And we looked at two options for this station location to move entrances into the right-of-way. And the focus here was to reduce cost as well as development risk. You might recall from the draft EIS that there was a southern station entrance for Denny located by kind of the Butcher Table property. There's a development proposed there that's moving along that presents a risk in terms of acquiring that property for the station location. So we looked at a couple different options for moving that station entrance into the right-of-way. This one is showing an entrance on Lenora Street adjacent to the Urban Triangle Park. This would permanently close Lenora Street between, there's an access driveway for the property there and 8th Avenue. We found that this would have minimal traffic effects, in fact, potential to improve traffic by reducing the intersection complexity. It reduces the development risk there and could save $20 million compared to the realigned financial plan. Next slide. This is showing another option for that similar concept. This would be on the other side of the street. Now north is to the top. We flipped around, but this is 8th Avenue and Westlake. It's on the west side of Westlake and would be reducing 8th Avenue, reducing the capacity of 8th Avenue and increasing the public space there and putting a station entrance into the right-of-way. That's right adjacent to the Shake Shack. Again, we did find minimal traffic effects with this. There would require some reconfiguration of the roadways in that area. And this would represent a cost delta of minus 60 million compared to the realigned financial plan. Next slide. Up at the Westlake Station, or down at the Westlake Station from here, we looked at an entrance consolidation proposal for Westlake. As you might recall, the draft EIS included 3 new entrances at Westlake. That would be in addition to the, I think, 7 or 8 entrances at the existing Westlake Station. This would consolidate those 3 new entrances into a single entrance. It would eliminate the 4th Avenue roadway closure that was identified in the draft EIS and represent 4 fewer business displacements. There would be a consolidated site there between Pike Street and Pine Street with the opportunity to provide or partner on an integrated joint development above the station. And it would add vertical circulation redundancy in a single location, which is, I think, a fairly substantial opportunity here that you could have additional vertical circulation adjacent to one another, which can improve both capacity as well as during maintenance, maintaining passenger circulation while that vertical circulation is maintained. And this would represent a $50 million savings in cost delta compared to the realigned financial plan. And then lastly, in downtown, we looked at a couple different options for the Midtown Station entrance locations. This one is north is to the left now. I hope you're not getting dizzy. And this was looking at shifting the station entrances into the right-of-way. This is at the southern entrance of the Midtown Station. You might recall that in the draft EIS, the entrance was kind of right where that Bank of America is at 800 Fifth Avenue at Columbia and 5th. This would move that entrance into the right-of-way. There's a risk associated with modifying the existing building to fit that entrance in. So this would reduce that risk. It would permanently narrow Columbia Street down to a single lane, but this would have minimal traffic effects given the volumes on that street. It would also add an escalator access to the station entrance, which did not have, or was not able to be provided because of the footprint constriction in the draft EIS. But this would only be for the shallower Midtown Station option. So we have an asterisk there that only when connecting to the shallower CID station, this wouldn't work for the deeper station entrance. Excuse me, deeper station. So that's Columbia Street. Next slide. The second entrance at the Midtown Station is at Madison Street and 4th Avenue. You might recall from the draft EIS, it was essentially using that Bartell building there at the corner So again, a similar concept to avoid that property impact. This would temporarily narrow 4th Avenue to 1 lane during construction, which would have substantial traffic and transit effects during construction, and then permanently narrow 4th Avenue to 2 lanes, which would have more minor effects during the operations of this station location. And a cost delta of minus 20 million associated with this opportunity. Okay, we pause for questions. I hope that that was clear, if not quick.
Okay, I'm going to look for hands up. I see Erica.
Should I just jump in?
Absolutely.
Okay, so thank you. I was trying to keep up. That was quick. With the Columbia Street condition, and it looks like also with this 4th Avenue option, do you guys have a better understanding of what happens to the sidewalk conditions in these areas, how constrained they would be for pedestrians if we were to shift access onto the right of way?
So the city standards for our sidewalks minimum next to stations is 18 feet. And I believe that was included in the design as a minimum. I don't have the dimensions for each of these. Well, there's probably some dimensions in there, but that was assumed to maintain the generous sidewalk width.
Okay. And then I know one of the few right-of-way entrances we have downtown into the existing system is that on 3rd Avenue for the Pioneer Square station. Is that what we should be keeping sort of mentally in mind when we're thinking about these, or is there a, excuse me, a tickle?
It depends. It depends on the space that's being able to be provided. I think that, and we'll talk a bit at the Ballard station, that Pioneer Square station entrance is very constrained. And as a result, it's only providing an escalator in one direction, a stair, and then a kind of separated elevator. So that is something that we would keep in mind, I think, when we get up to Ballard. I think for these, we were actually trying to provide something more substantial. Actually, the other Pioneer Square station entrance is also in the right-of-way. It just has more space. And I don't have photos here. We have some examples from other stations. The one that comes to mind for me is in New York on the new 2nd Avenue subway. They have a nice glass canopy that comes out and consolidates everything, but it's in the right-of-way. So if you go back, actually, Alexis, to the Denny options, and maybe the Lenora, or this one. Actually, yeah, you can go forward to the one that shows Lenora because it's zoomed in a bit. You can see that it's actually quite a bit more substantial than Pioneer Square. So we see an opportunity to provide more of a station entrance, but in the right-of-way. So again, it depends on the space available. I'll kind of point out that these options at Denny would be larger. We think the Columbia option could be fairly substantial. The Madison one would probably be a bit narrower. And then when we talk about Ballard, that might be a similar configuration to the Pioneer Square option.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, and perhaps we should move on and try to get through Ballard.
Okay, so Inner Bay Smith Cove, further studies, community feedback. Next slide. A couple studies identified here, opportunities to address concerns with the guideway along Elliott Avenue and potential effects to properties, including options to consolidate Smith Cove and Inner Bay stations. And also a study to look at shifting the tunnel portal, the Mercer tunnel portal specifically to the south. And this is to avoid concerns about the steep slope where that tunnel portal was planned. So next slide. Because Alexis is having audio issues, I'll just quickly run through that. We conducted 3 workshops and open houses for this segment. There was 8+ community briefings and meetings, 2 online surveys, and over 700 survey responses. Next slide. A few different options that we looked at. North is to the right. I think this is consistent throughout, so hopefully we help you get oriented on these. Modified SIB1 alignment, that's the DEIS preferred Gaylor Street Station location. And the modification here was to shift the Inner Bay station to the south to straddle Dravis Street. And this would avoid 20 businesses being displaced, as well as the Seattle Storm, right, including the Seattle Storm practice facility that's planned there and a planned Seattle City Light substation. It also adds a station entrance on both sides of Dravis Street, so improvement to passenger access, but would also add a temporary lane closures to Dravis for 1.5 years to construct underneath it. The station would essentially be underneath Dravis Street with entrances on both sides. Next slide. Feedback we heard was interest in the shifted Inner Bay station for the improved pedestrian, bike, and transit connections. There were some concerns about those traffic effects during construction. There was interest in reducing the impacts to the businesses, including the Seattle Storm practice facility. There are concerns still about guideway crossings of Elliott Avenue that are essentially the same with this as was in the draft EIS. But there's interest in that Gaylor Street, Smith Cove station location for accessibility and pedestrian, bicycle, and transit connections. And then interest in maintaining 2 stations in the Inner Bay area compared to the consolidated, which I'll cover in a moment. Next slide. So this is the modified SIUB 3 alignment. So this goes to the Mercer portal location. We found, unfortunately, that the shifted portal location was not practical for the Mercer portal. There's an opportunity for partnership for ETOD. I'll just quickly describe that. This would shift the Smith Cove station location from the south side of the Magnolia Bridge to the north side, adjacent to the, or just at the edge of the Armory property. So a lot of opportunity for equitable TOD at that property. And similar to the other option, the Dravis location would be straddling Dravis Street there for the Inner Bay station. Next slide. So there was interest in the development potential of the Armory site, but questions about the compatibility, excuse me, of the station with the likely or potential land uses there. Same interest there in the Inner Bay station options, and some concerns that the shifted station location would make the access to the cruise terminals and key destinations along Elliott more difficult for the Smith Cove station. Next slide. The consolidated alignment, this read potential to consolidate the 2 stations into one. This would be in a tunnel, unlike the elevated guideway with the other options. This would be a tunnel almost the entirety of the way from downtown into Ballard. However, there would be a retained cut along 15th Avenue that you can see there in that darker charcoal with a station location around the existing Armory Way. There would be temporary lane closures of 15th Avenue for 1.5 years as that tunnel goes underneath where the Magnolia Bridge is. It would consolidate the 2 stations into one, which would include a minor reduction in ridership. It would extend the tunnel alignment, and there's ongoing analysis of the unstable slope risk in the Queen Anne hillside. So some unanswered questions there about constructability and risk associated with these steep slopes. This would add $210 million to the project cost compared to the realigned financial plan. And lastly, on this, concerns about a single station reducing access to the surrounding neighborhoods, the potential for TOD along the corridor. There's interest in extending the tunnel alignment and potential redevelopment opportunities, and interest in fewer property and business and traffic effects with the consolidated station. Next slide. I'm just going to kind of skip over this since we went through everything, and we're running very short on time. So maybe we just go up to Ballard and then we can take questions at the end. So the Ballard further studies and community feedback up there on the top right, again, north to the right. Station access and safety improvements, including north and south of Market Street with the tunnel 15th. Look at station cost savings and third-party funding. Look at pedestrian access improvements along 15th Avenue with the tunnel 14th station. And then finally, look at the shifted tunnel 14th Avenue alignment. option, which I'll go through in a second. So for the Tunnel 15th station, you see 15th there in the middle, north is to the right. We're looking at reducing costs, essentially. So what we found was an opportunity to reduce the number of station entrances as well as the amount of property being used to construct the station. So we are showing there that there's no entrance at 53rd Street, which was in the draft EIS, which would reduce access from the south, or would just mean that there'd be a longer walk from people walking to that side. It would reduce the construction staging area. It would avoid displacement of the Safeway store that had been assumed in the draft EIS, but then also reduces the opportunities for equitable TOD on that site. And we did find potential to reduce the size of the west station entrance and avoid that property. And that's what I was referring to with the Pioneer Square station. That would lead to a very slim station entrance along Market Street, similar to Pioneer Square. And there would be, I think, concerns on the capacity of that entrance and future growth in ridership. The cost delta compared to the realigned financial plan is plus 70 million. You recall from the draft EIS that was about plus 200 million. So that these savings reduce that considerably, or plus 30 million with that smaller west entrance option. Next slide. There was general interest in the cost savings ideas that support siting a station at 15th Avenue. There was strong interest in the Tunnel 15th station location with access on both sides of 15th. And there was some concern about reducing future capacity with the smaller entrances, specifically that west entrance. And some concerns about the reduced equitable TOD opportunity with the reduction in property. Next slide. We also looked at shifting the entire station into the right-of-way. The station in the draft EIS and the previous concept is actually being constructed within private property on the east side of 15th. This would shift that construction into 15th Avenue and also include just those two entrances. The big effect I'll speak to here is a partial closure of 15th Avenue for 4 years, which would have fairly substantial traffic effects during construction, and temporary closures of the intersection, partial closures of the intersection of Market Street and 15th Avenue. And this would have similar cost savings to the other option reviewed that keeps the station out of the public right-of-way. Slide. Strong concerns about the potential roadway effects during construction to traffic, freight, and overall access. And we also looked at siting an entrance to the north of Market Street, and this could work with either of the two cost-saving options we looked at for 15th. You can see there a slim entrance in the street on the north side, the northwest corner of Market Street. This would reduce Market Street from 7 to 5 lanes in this section. There would be a temporary partial closures of 15th Avenue for up to 2 years, probably an additional lane or two to construct that station entrance, and that would connect in underground to the planned station entrances on the south side of Market Street. And this, this would have a cost delta compared to the realigned financial plan of about $200 million, but I think this is including that south entrance, so I'm not sure about that. Next slide, there were some concerns about potential traffic effects associated with construction of this option, but interest in the entrance north of Market to expand access. Next slide. I'll just go very quickly. We looked at some potential options to improve access along 15th at the 15th and Market intersection to access the 14th option. And these are all sorts of different options that represent all sorts of different costs, including surface improvements and pedestrian bridges. So let everyone can peruse this in their own time. I'll just go over it quickly. And next slide. There was some interest in the grade separated improvements, but others were interested in the at-grade improvements. Next slide. Lastly, we looked at shifting the Tunnel 14th Avenue station out of the public right-of-way and into private property. to reduce costs, which is a bit counterintuitive with the other option, but there's cost drivers associated with constructing within the 14th Avenue right-of-way. This would avoid the Safeway property, which is the primary cost savings, but reduces the equitable TOD opportunity considerably with that. It also would require an additional street crossing to access the station from the west. It would save $140 million compared to the realigned financial plan. I think there's a summary slide. Oh, right, the feedback. There were some concerns about that reduced equitable TOD, concerns about the access from the west and the additional street crossing. There was some interest overall in the Tunnel 14th station location during the draft EIS process, including the ability to accommodate future areas of growth to the east and the north and avoiding impacts around 15th. That's, yes. Just very quickly, you can see the costs there at the bottom and some of the summary, but I think we want to give at least a few minutes for questions. And I know that this was a lot of information.
Great, thank you. I mean, I think it's pretty clear that we were able to get through the Ballard line today, and that I know you have slides about the West Seattle portion that I'm hoping, Valerie, we can figure out a way to reschedule it another time. But if people have questions about what we've seen since we left downtown, I'm going to look for hands up.
Joe, I think that makes sense. Sorry. I think that makes sense. I know that Sound Transit staff and Valerie need to jump at 10:30 to a important executive committee meeting at Sound Transit. So I think rescheduling West Seattle makes sense.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, yes, we can, Valerie.
We do have a briefing scheduled for the first April meeting, I think, once the board decides. So, you know, we have time on the agenda already.
Great. I don't see any hands up. I'm going to kick off questions on this part of it by asking about the guideway on 15th. One of the things the commissioners have been very concerned about is the bulk and scale of the guideway. And I think you had a comment that said you had concern about how it switched to different sides of the street, but I didn't see anything that showed any resolution so that it doesn't have to snake back and forth across the street as it goes. Is that correct?
I think very high level, the Republican portal location is what was causing that or leading to that alignment that goes back and forth. And that's one of the reasons there was interest in looking at closer at the Mercer portal location that would reduce that number of crossings. The shifted location, like I said, was found to be not practical. The other location, I think there are some risks associated with the location that's in the draft EIS, some risks associated with that I probably am not the best person to speak to. So in terms of the, if it ends up with the Republican portal, I think maybe further work to look at reducing that guideway crossings.
Okay. And then I think this is the first time any of us have seen the notion that there might be a way to avoid a guideway on a lot of 15th. So that's probably something we'd just like to see some more of it at some time. Or, maybe that's an idea that's going to come and go before we get a chance to see this again. I don't know. But just know that the guideway in general, the mass of it, is a concern wherever it crops up.
Thank you for that.
Anything else? So, Valerie, I think we're ready to wrap up. Overwhelmed and done.
And, Jill and commissioners, well, first, just thanks again to Sandra, Daniel, and Alexis for jumping in at the last minute. I know that we were originally going to receive a presentation from Leah Chahim and from Sloan Dawson, but they were engaged. So I appreciate you guys stepping in at the last minute to walk us through a comprehensive agenda. Valerie and I will look to a future date sooner rather than later to continue the conversation, in part based upon, maybe some advancements based upon what's happening today at the executive committee and next week at the full board.